He barked at him to pass out documents like a damn office boy, then sneered to the room, "He's good with paper, not with numbers," as if the man standing there wasn't a senior strategist, but just another black face to belittle. That's where this story begins, not in triumph, not in a boardroom handshake, but in raw, public humiliation, delivered in front of dozens of executives while cameras rolled. They didn't care about his resume. They didn't care about his results. All they saw was skin. What they didn't see was what he was hiding, the truth, the leverage, and the quiet authority to dismantle everything they thought they controlled. Because the man they tried to erase wasn't just watching, he was documenting. And when the moment came, he didn't raise his voice. He raised the floor beneath their feet and dropped them through it. But how did we get to this? Who is this man they tried to reduce to nothing? And why are the people who laughed that day now begging for a second chance? Watch carefully. The deeper you go, the more the truth unravels. If this moment hit you, don't just scroll. Like the video. Subscribe for more stories that don't look away from injustice. And tell us, where are you watching from? And what would you have done if that humiliation had been aimed at you? Let's talk about it in the comments. The elevator chimed softly as it arrived on the 43rd floor of Argon Strategic Partners, a Manhattan-based private equity firm known as much for its ruthless efficiency as its glass and steel skyline views. Thane Mercer stepped out, taking in the silence that clung to the executive level like expensive cologne. His polished Oxfords echoed against the imported Italian tile, each step measured. He carried no briefcase, just a slim, black folio tucked under one arm and the kind of confidence earned, not inherited. His presence was understated, deliberate. He'd been brought in as a senior operations consultant to oversee the firm's internal realignment ahead of a $2 billion European merger. But as he would learn within minutes, this wasn't going to be the kind of welcome that matched his credentials. A young assistant named Petra, barely out of grad school, greeted him with a clipped nod. "Mr. Mercer?" she asked, eyes flicking down his frame as though confirming he wasn't a delivery guy. "Right this way." Thane offered a polite smile. "Just Thane is fine." Petra didn't respond. She turned and led him past open glass offices filled with bright furniture, ergonomic chairs, and top-shelf coffee machines humming softly beside crystal water dispensers. Partners laughed in quiet corners. Junior associates bent over dual-monitor desks, the hum of productivity curated to Wall Street perfection. But Thane didn't stop at any of these offices. Instead, Petra guided him through a side corridor that dimmed with each step, past the copier room, past janitorial storage, past a sign that read server maintenance authorized only. She tapped a code into a keypad and the door hissed open. "Here we are," she said, motioning inside. "Your temporary consulting office." Thane stepped in. The air was 10 degrees colder, thick with the sterile scent of toner and old Ethernet cables. A single desk, missing a leg and braced by stacked boxes of print paper, sat in the corner beside a leaking HVAC vent that dripped into a stained ceiling tile. A folding chair. A flickering fluorescent tube overhead. A broken shredder huddled like a corpse near the filing cabinet. Petra gestured awkwardly. "We're full up this week. This is all that's available. Let me know if you need anything." Her tone made it clear, "Don't." Thane gave a slight nod. "I'll make it work." She vanished before he finished the sentence. Alone, Thane placed his folio down and opened his laptop on the slanted desk, forcing it to sit level with a manila folder under one corner. The pipe above groaned. He took a breath and stared at the blinking cursor on his login screen. "All right then," he muttered. "Let's get to work." Upstairs, Jasper Kincaid stood at the far end of the boardroom, a glass of green juice in one hand and a smirk in the other. He was all designer tailoring and weaponized charisma, the kind of executive who could close a deal with a handshake and crush a career with a compliment. "So," he said to the room of investors, "before we begin today's projections, I'd like to introduce a new resource." His tone turned playful. "Everyone meet Darnell from logistics support." Laughter scattered across the room as heads turned toward the back. Thane, who had just entered quietly with his notes, paused. Jasper clapped him on the shoulder. Sorry, Thane, right? My bad." These names are hard to keep up with. He grinned wide. Anyway, Thane's our temp consultant. He'll be observing today's call, mostly shadowing. The investors, mostly men, mostly white, mostly expensive, offered obligatory nods. One murmured something inaudible and chuckled. Thane didn't respond. He didn't flinch. He sat down, opened his folio, and began taking notes. Jasper moved on, commanding the room like it was his birthright. Thane sat through the entire 90-minute session without a single question addressed to him. Despite being the only person in the room who'd actually built 2 companies from the ground up and exited both with clean books and growth margins that exceeded projections by double digits. But that didn't matter here. Not yet. After the meeting, Thane stepped into the hallway to grab coffee. Jasper caught up with him at the machine, leaning in with that wolfish grin. Hope you're not too thrown off by the intro. Just having some fun. Gotta keep things light around here, you know? Thane stirred his coffee slowly, eyes steady. Of course, he said. Names are tricky. Jasper gave him a sideways look, uncertain if that was sarcasm. He didn't pursue it. Anyway, if you need anything, just shout. Petra can get you more toner or whatever you people use down there. He winked and walked away. That night, Thane reviewed the call transcript from the meeting. The air was colder than usual, the hum of electronics louder in the silence. He booted up the laptop the firm provided him and opened the internal systems portal. What he saw made his breath slow. His employee profile had changed. Not just a typo or a misfiled document, but a complete restructuring of his internal presence. His credentials were no longer listed as Senior Consultant, External Strategy. Instead, the title read Support Staff Temp Rotation. His degrees, MBA from Wharton, undergraduate in Systems Engineering from Stanford, were gone. In their place, professional history pending verification. Even the photo had been swapped out. The crisp headshot he'd uploaded, taken during a keynote panel at Harvard, was replaced by a grainy low-resolution snapshot that barely resembled him. Below it, a tab labeled Limited Access Contractor. Thane's jaw tightened. This wasn't a clerical error. This was surgical sabotage. Someone had gone in and rewritten who he was to the system that defined legitimacy in this building. He glanced at the system log. The edit had been made at 10:03 p.m. the night before, after hours, after the meeting. He knew who had the clearance and the motive. At 9:20 a.m., Thane entered the strategy bullpen to join the daily sync meeting. Jasper was already there, leaned against the glass wall like a king awaiting court, surrounded by his loyal inner circle. The moment Thane stepped in, conversations dipped in volume, heads turned, smiles faded to guarded indifference. He took a seat near the back, opened his folio, and listened. Jasper ran through performance metrics for the quarter, clearly steering the conversation away from cost overruns in 3 divisions. When it was time for open contributions, Thane raised his hand with quiet confidence. Jasper's eyes narrowed. "The floor's yours, Darnell," he said, smirking. A couple of junior analysts chuckled, unsure if they were allowed to laugh. Thane ignored it. He stood, placed a printout on the conference table, and began. "I've identified 3 key areas in vendor alignment that overlap with internal service redundancy. By consolidating these workflows and terminating 3 of the 6 legacy contracts, we could cut operations spend by 18.2% across fiscal Q3-Q4 without layoffs." He handed out supporting data, clean, precise, irrefutable. Jasper didn't even look at the packet. Instead, he rocked back in his chair, tapped his pen against his lips, and said in a slow, exaggerated drawl, Now ain't that something? Y'all hear that? 18%. MMM. His voice mimicked the cadence of old Southern minstrel shows, complete with a mocking grin. The room fell into stunned silence. A few of the younger team members glanced nervously between each other. One woman covered her mouth. Thane stood still. Not frozen, not shocked, just burning quietly. Jasper leaned forward and grabbed the proposal from the center of the table, held it up like he was reading something profound, then made a show of folding it twice and tossing it into the trash can beside him. "Thanks, Darnell," he said, his voice sharp now. Maybe next time run that past me first, so we don't waste everyone's time." No one spoke. No one intervened. Silence had become policy in that room. After the meeting, Thane returned to his corner of exile beneath the dripping HVAC vent, the only evidence of his suggestion now lying in a bin upstairs. He didn't rage. He didn't sulk. He just opened a spreadsheet and began cross-referencing department-level transactions for the past 6 quarters. The system might have erased his resume, but it hadn't erased his access to the data that mattered. A calendar notification blinked at the corner of his screen. Team Integration Lunch, 12:30 p.m. Location, Parker's Taproom. Thane stared at it for a moment, his fingers motionless over the keyboard. Parker's Taproom. The name alone stirred something visceral. 3 years ago, he had walked into that bar with 2 colleagues after a finance tech conference. Before he could order a drink, the bartender had asked for 3 forms of ID and then suggested, loudly, that he check if his group was already seated in the back. He'd left without confrontation, but not without remembering. And now, Jasper had scheduled the firm's official team lunch there. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a move, deliberate, precise, designed to isolate. Thane didn't reply to the invite. He simply closed the screen and returned to his work, scanning vendor payment logs for irregularities. But at 12:15, Petra knocked on the server room door and poked her head in. "Everyone's waiting," she said flatly. "Carpool's leaving now. You're coming, right?" Thane looked at her, then at the flickering fluorescent light above. He shut his laptop with quiet finality. "Of course," he said. "Wouldn't miss it." The ride to Parker's was quiet, tense with the false cheer of people pretending they weren't complicit in something cruel. Jasper led the way into the restaurant, tossing his jacket at a host like it was a coat check, and ordered a round of drinks before the staff had even handed out menus. As Thane stepped through the door, the air thickened. The same bar, the same brass fixtures, the same woman at the front, only older now, and still scanning him the same way, as a threat in a blazer. They were seated in the back, of course, not far from the same booth he'd been steered toward 3 years ago. Thane took the corner seat this time, facing the entrance. He ordered sparkling water and sat through Jasper's forced camaraderie, team bonding, he called it, while the conversation spun around market disruption, crypto rumors, and vacation homes in Jackson Hole. At one point, Jasper leaned across the table, lifted his glass, and said, "To new blood, especially the kind that stirs things up." His voice rang with mock sincerity. The others raised their glasses. Thane raised his, but didn't drink. That afternoon, after returning from the lunch, Thane opened his inbox to find a reply from the firm's European partner, the same partner overseeing part of the impending $2 billion merger. The message was short and jarring. "Mr. Mercer, we received your note and are deeply concerned by its tone. We had hoped for a more disciplined approach. Please clarify your position before we escalate further." Thane's pulse steadied. He opened the sent folder and pulled up the original message. What he saw made the heat rise in his chest. The body of the email, the one he remembered writing, had been altered. Phrases were misaligned. Words like tentative valuation had been replaced with unverified projection. A line where he'd recommended further review of internal legal counsel now read as "We recommend internal legal retraction." The tone read as accusatory, amateurish, nothing like the document he'd drafted. Thane scrolled to the bottom and checked the audit log. The timestamp of the edit was there, 5 minutes before it had been sent. Done from Jasper's administrator account. Thane leaned back in the wobbly chair, staring at the fluorescent lights above as they flickered slightly in time with the server hum. The sabotage was no longer subtle. It was strategic, targeted, aimed at undermining his reputation with the very people he'd been hired to impress. And worse, if he retaliated too directly, he would only confirm the perception they were building, that he was difficult, volatile, combative. So he chose silence. For now, he drafted a reply to the European partners, calm and factual, asking for a brief call to clarify and apologizing for any confusion caused by system formatting. Then he saved a copy of both emails, original and modified, to a secure cloud drive, labeling them quietly, Kincaid_edit_1. He knew this wouldn't be the last. Later that evening, long after the office had emptied, Thane sat alone in the quiet of the server room, scrolling through Jasper's internal communications folder, a shared space Thane technically shouldn't have had access to. But the firm's IT hadn't revoked his inherited permissions from a previous project. There, he found something else. A draft of a presentation Jasper planned to deliver at the board review next week. One morning, as he entered the elevator alone, his security badge beeped with an unfamiliar red light before the doors opened. A moment later, Petra stepped in behind him, clutching her tablet like a shield. He nodded politely. She didn't meet his gaze. On the 43rd floor, the usual reception smile from the front desk was missing. Instead, a new intern glanced up and looked away. Thane made his way to the server room, now more storage closet than workspace, where his desk had gained a new companion. A broken office chair wedged in the corner, crusted with duct tape and forgotten gum wrappers. The air had grown colder in there, not from the vent, but from the silence that greeted him everywhere else. At 9:42 a.m., a system-wide memo arrived in every employee inbox, marked Internal Operations Advisory. The wording was clinical, but the message unmistakable. Effective immediately, all consultation-related communications must be routed through departmental managers. Please refrain from engaging with external contractors directly unless supervised. Thane read the memo twice. The term external contractors was highlighted in red. His name wasn't mentioned, but he didn't need it to be. By noon, the isolation had calcified. Co-workers who once offered polite nods now turned down side hallways when he approached. Emails he sent to request data access went unanswered. Shared drives began showing access denied. The few times he approached someone directly, they gave forced smiles and vague apologies. "Sorry, I need approval from Jasper before I can help you." "Hey, I'd love to chat, but I'm actually in back-to-backs all week." One even said, "I think I'm not supposed to be seen giving you anything." She laughed like it was a joke, but her eyes said it wasn't. Thane took note of each one. Worse still, his ID badge began to fail in more subtle ways. On Tuesday, it refused access to the executive elevator. On Wednesday, it wouldn't unlock the break room coffee bar. On Thursday, it denied him entry to the restroom on the 43rd floor. He stood outside the door, scanning again and again, watching the red light blink as though mocking him. Behind him, two analysts exited, glancing at him with faint pity. Thane turned without a word and took the stairs, 8 floors down to the visitor level, where the public restrooms were. When he walked in, the tiles smelled faintly of bleach and lemon-scented neglect. A maintenance worker paused, eyed his clothes, then nodded slowly as if realizing he wasn't just a delivery man. Thane washed his hands in silence and stared at his reflection. His face hadn't changed. His suit was still pressed, his posture still upright. But in the eyes of this firm, his identity had been quietly deleted. That afternoon, he received a meeting request labeled Consultant Scope Clarification Mandatory. Jasper's name was in the invite. The meeting room was listed as Basement Conference C, a space normally used for old equipment storage and vendor demos. When Thane arrived, the lights were flickering, and only 2 chairs were set out. Jasper entered 5 minutes late, tossing his coat over a pile of unused extension cords. He didn't sit. "Look," Jasper began, voice tinged with faux casualness. "There's been some confusion about your role here. People are unclear about the chain of command." Thane didn't respond. Jasper continued, pacing slowly. "We've had feedback. Some folks are uncomfortable with your approach. It's disruptive, too direct, too invasive." He turned and leaned in, lowering his voice. "I get it. You're used to being the smartest guy in the room. But here, we value harmony over heroics." Thane finally spoke. "Harmony built on avoidance isn't sustainable." Jasper smiled thinly. "No one's avoiding you, Thane. They're just following protocol." He stood straight. "And starting tomorrow, your badge access will be limited to your designated zone. For everyone's clarity, the meeting ended without handshake or eye contact." The silence wasn't accidental. It was a cultivated climate of fear and self-preservation. Thane, as usual, arrived before the sun, scanning his badge into the sub-level workspace that had now become more prison than office. He reviewed the finalized materials for the quarterly stakeholder summit, a hybrid in-person and live-streamed event with investors from both coasts and a delegation dialing in from Zurich. He had designed half of the operational optimization deck himself, staying up 2 nights to integrate cross-departmental analytics and supplier alignment curves that even the Zurich team had previously failed to synthesize. But his name wasn't anywhere on the slides. When the invite came for the summit, it listed him not as a presenter or a strategy lead, but simply support logistics. He knew exactly what that meant. The summit began at 10 a.m. sharp in the East Boardroom, a marble and glass theater equipped with embedded cameras, LED panels, and a 20-seat mahogany oval table gleaming under designer lighting. Jasper stood at the head like a general at parade, sleeves rolled up just enough to look active, voice smooth as silk dipped in oil. "Today's a big day," he opened, smiling at the cameras. "Let's talk about Echelon's future." Thane remained at the far side of the room, silent, hands behind his back, as if waiting to be summoned. At 10:13 a.m., Jasper snapped his fingers without looking. "Thane, hand these out, would you?" he said, gesturing at a stack of printed briefs on the sideboard. Thane moved forward and picked them up, aware of every eye in the room, aware the camera feed was streaming live to over 50 investors across 4 continents. As he distributed the documents, Jasper grinned and added, "He's good with paper, not with numbers." A few chuckles echoed from a table. One executive leaned sideways and whispered something to his neighbor. The live-stream chat window, visible from the media team's terminal, blinked with polite question marks and silence. Thane didn't react. He finished handing out the decks, returned to his corner, and stood, expression blank, but spine straight. That night, long after the summit ended, Thane remained in the server room, reviewing replays of the meeting. He had screen captured the moment Jasper dismissed him like a courier, time-stamped the remark, and saved it in a folder titled Public Humiliation Recorded. But it wasn't until Tuesday that the real wound arrived. At 11:32 a.m., Petra sent out a Tuesday humor email chain, an internal tradition normally reserved for harmless memes and corporate satire. This week's file, a video clip 37 seconds long, taken from the summit livestream. It had been trimmed, overlaid with cartoon sound effects, and captioned with text in bold Comic Sans, "When you major in paper shuffling." It showed Jasper's smirk, Thane walking obediently between chairs, and the line, "He's good with paper, not with numbers." Played back twice, echoing with laughter added in post. The clip had already been opened 43 times by the time Thane saw it. No one responded. No one defended him. No one objected. Silence again, louder than the laughter. Thane stared at it for several long minutes. His heart didn't race. His hands didn't shake. He simply forwarded the clip to his encrypted archive with the subject line, "Mockery circulated internally, proof of coordinated derision." At 4:05 p.m., as he walked down the main hall to retrieve printed audit reports, 3 junior analysts passed him, laughing at something on one of their phones. One glanced at Thane mid-laugh, caught herself, and looked away fast, cheeks flushing. Thane didn't need to ask what they were watching. He already knew. Even the printer in the hallway, the one he'd been temporarily assigned to use since his access had been revoked upstairs, had been labeled with a post-it note, "Mercer's mailroom." Thane tore it off without expression and kept walking. The weight pressing on his shoulders no longer came from humiliation, but from a clarity sharpened by repetition. They weren't just ignoring him. They were erasing him, and worse, enjoying it. By 6 p.m., the office emptied again. He returned to the server room, shut the door, and began a new document. This one wasn't a spreadsheet or a vendor review. It was a summary of coordinated workplace harassment. Names, dates, links, internal directives, and cultural impact patterns. He titled it simply, "Systemic Undermining Phase 1. Below the header, he typed the first line, "When they can't beat your mind, they try to silence your presence." Below the fold, a column listed contributors to the success of the merger rollout. Jasper's name appeared 3 times, once under strategy lead, once under global liaison, and again under innovation oversight. Supporting roles were filled by a select few from his inner circle. Nowhere, not even in fine print, did the name Thane Mercer appear. Thane read the bulletin alone in the server room, the fluorescent light above him flickering in sync with the cursor blinking on his screen. He didn't frown. He didn't sigh. He simply archived the bulletin beside the video file, tagged it Omission Intentional Discredit. The act of exclusion wasn't an accident. It was a calculated blow to his record, designed to erase him from institutional memory. They weren't just mocking him now, they were erasing him from history. 2 days later came the culmination. The final signing ceremony for the $2 billion merger with Helix Partners, a multinational firm whose arrival would triple Echelon's global presence. The event was to be held in the building's main conference suite, converted into a media stage with high-gloss backdrops, national flags, and a minimalist branding palette emphasizing trust and innovation. Thane had spent weeks structuring the operational framework that made the merger possible. He had realigned Echelon's vendor contracts, resolved duplications in 5 departments, and even streamlined tax liabilities in 4 countries. But he wasn't asked to speak. He wasn't invited to the stage. He wasn't even included in the prep call. Instead, at 9:17 a.m., a calendar notification popped up. Support Standby Proximity Room 41A. He recognized the room. It was a narrow, glassless holding chamber down the hall from the conference suite, used for coat checks and catering overflow during events. At 10:01 a.m., as the event began with a camera pan over smiling executives, Thane stood silently outside the door to room 41A. He wore the same suit he'd worn the day he was introduced as Darnell from Logistics, though now it hung looser on his frame, part fatigue, part tension. Petra appeared briefly, earpiece in one ear and clipboard in hand. "They may need you to run data if the Zurich team asks last-minute numbers," she said flatly, avoiding his eyes. "Otherwise, just stay nearby for optics." Thane looked at her evenly. "Optics?" Petra shrugged. "Jasper wants consistency in the visual theme. Global unity. You know, clean look." She said it as if reading from a script written by someone who had never faced this kind of exclusion before. As she turned to leave, she added without turning, "He said your presence on stage might disrupt the brand image." Thane watched her walk away, then looked down the hall toward the large glass double doors of the conference suite, beyond which he could hear laughter and the gentle clinking of glass. From where he stood, he could just make out Jasper's voice through the open doorway, thanking the Helix board and attributing this seamless transition to the relentless innovation of our internal leadership. He stood outside that door for 41 minutes. Inside, cameras flashed. Applause echoed. Pens scratched across paper as the final contracts were signed. Jasper posed with each delegate individually. His voice was captured in soundbites that would be replayed across LinkedIn and Bloomberg. This is what collaboration looks like, visionaries building the future together. Not once did Thane's name cross anyone's lips. When the doors finally opened and the guests flowed out into the hallway, Thane was still standing where they left him. One of the Zurich team members, a man Thane had worked closely with via email for over a month, walked past him without recognition. He didn't even slow his stride. Jasper brushed past next, adjusting his tie with a grin, flanked by 2 assistants. As he passed Thane, he said softly, without breaking stride, "Appreciate your silence today. It helped a lot." Then he was gone, swept away in a wave of suits and praise. Thane remained still for another minute, then stepped back into room 41A and quietly sat down. "Historic day," he kept repeating, clapping shoulders, throwing rehearsed smiles at passing interns. A press kit went live at 9:30 a.m., featuring carefully curated photos of a merger signing ceremony. Jasper with Helix executives. Jasper in front of the new co-branded backdrop. Jasper raising a champagne flute. Thane not pictured, not mentioned, not even footnoted. But unlike before, Thane didn't open the press kit. He had already opened something else. At 10:12 a.m., an unscheduled visitor entered the building. Matthias Adler, global CEO of Helix Partners. His arrival was unexpected, unannounced, and very deliberate. Security didn't stall him. His presence was too heavy, his name too sharp. He walked through the front lobby, past stunned receptionists, and requested access to the man behind the structure. No one knew what he meant. Jasper was on a call in the executive suite when Petra interrupted. Face pale, voice hushed. "Matthias Adler is here. He's asking to speak with Thane Mercer." Jasper froze mid-sentence. "With who?" he asked slowly, like the air had gone thick. "With Thane. He said he was told the structural design of our merger strategy came from someone named Mercer, not you." Silence wrapped around the room like a noose. Jasper didn't respond at first. Then he stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and said, "Bring him to conference room 6. I'll handle it." But Petra didn't move. "He's not asking to meet Thane," she said carefully. "He's asking to be briefed by him, personally. Now." And then, as if summoned by fate's cruel sense of timing, Thane entered the room. He wasn't supposed to be there. No one had messaged him. But he already knew. He had been watching the security cameras, because unlike what Jasper thought, his access had never really been revoked. Not fully. Not from the network that mattered. He walked in wearing the same dark navy suit, but something about him was different now. His posture wasn't guarded. It was poised, grounded. He didn't look like a contractor. He looked like someone who had nothing left to lose, and everything under control. Adler turned and smiled. "You must be Mr. Mercer," he said warmly. "Your modeling saved our balance sheets in Q1 last year. We didn't realize you joined Echelon." Jasper stepped forward, trying to regain control. He's been assisting in some back-end structuring, but the vision. Adler cut him off with a polite but firm wave. "We've been following Mr. Mercer's strategic frameworks since he consulted in Zurich. When we saw the mirrored logic in your proposal, we assumed he'd led the project. Now that I know he's here, I'd prefer to speak with him." Jasper's face didn't twitch, but the silence between his clenched teeth did. Thane inclined his head. "Of course, Mr. Adler. Happy to walk you through it." Jasper interjected. "We have a deck prepared." But Thane raised a hand calmly. "I don't need a deck." They sat in conference room 6. No slides. No assistants. Just Thane, a whiteboard marker, and 5 executives from Helix Partners. In 38 minutes, he rebuilt the core logic of the merger structure from memory. He quoted logistical models, legal overlays, and equity thresholds without hesitation. He recalled multi-region fiscal windows by date. He cited cost drift predictions with a 1.3% margin of error off the top of his head. When Adler asked about post-integration resilience, Thane paused only long enough to say, "Already accounted for. See the final tier, Phase 3 model, Zurich, 2 years forward." One of the Helix board members looked stunned. Another whispered something to Adler. When the meeting ended, Adler didn't shake Jasper's hand. He turned to Thane and said, "Are you committed to this company?" Thane held his gaze. "I'm committed to the work," he said. Adler nodded once. "That may have to change." Meetings that once opened with his voice now began with awkward glances toward the empty chair Thane hadn't yet filled. But it wasn't Thane who adjusted his behavior. He arrived each day with the same quiet stride, the same tailored suit, the same worn leather folio, only now conversations fell silent when he passed, not from dismissal, but from uncertainty. They no longer knew who he really was. And that made him dangerous. On Thursday morning, a second Helix communique arrived, not through the standard email, but hand-delivered by a courier in a sealed envelope marked, "For the board only." It was short. "We are prepared to finalize the agreement contingent on Mr. Mercer's placement as Chief Strategic Officer and Equity Partner. If this term is non-negotiable, we are prepared to walk." Chaos unfolded behind closed doors. Phones rang. Emergency sessions were called. Jasper spent the entire morning in damage control, first denying the term, then blaming miscommunication, then attempting to propose a compromise that Helix's legal team summarily rejected. By 3:45 p.m., the board summoned an emergency vote. It passed. At 4:12 p.m., the press release draft was approved. Friday at noon, an all-hands meeting was scheduled to announce critical changes in leadership. Jasper stood at the front of the auditorium, jaw tight, tie slightly loosened, the ghost of his authority clinging to him like cologne gone stale. When Thane entered, alone, the room went still. He didn't head for the back row as expected. He walked directly to the front, where a second lectern had been placed beside Jasper's. Petra, standing at the side, handed him a tablet. He didn't need it. He laid it down without unlocking it. Then he turned to face the crowd. "Some of you know me as a consultant," he began, his voice even, clear, every syllable deliberate. "Others know me as the guy from the server room, or logistics, or in one notable case, Darnell." Laughter fluttered awkwardly, then faded. "What you may not know is that 6 months ago, I was approached by a financial trust to evaluate this firm's long-term viability. That trust, Borealis Equity, has since acquired a controlling interest in Echelon Capital Holdings." He paused. "I am the managing partner of that trust." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jasper's eyes locked on Thane, unreadable but visibly clenched. Thane continued. "Every barrier placed in my way was noted. Every document tampered with. Every incident, from misattributed credit to digitally altered communications, was recorded. I chose not to retaliate in the moment. Not because I was powerless, but because I needed the patterns to be visible to everyone." He looked around the room. "They are now." Then calmly, he turned to Jasper. "Effective immediately, Jasper Kincaid's executive authority is suspended pending formal review by the Ethics Subcommittee." Jasper laughed once, a single bark. "You're joking." Thane tilted his head. "I'm not. And if you'd read the Borealis Charter before you tried to forge my emails, you'd know it includes zero tolerance for hostile leadership cultures." He turned back to the staff. "There will be changes. Some of you have made those changes necessary. Some of you have quietly endured what should never have been acceptable. That ends now." Jasper stepped forward. "You think you can run this place?" Thane didn't blink. "No. I think we can run it better, without the poison." But the silence that followed in Jasper's office was suffocating. He sat behind his desk, staring blankly at the monitors that had once broadcast his dominance across the firm. Now they only displayed headlines. "Internal coup at Echelon Capital. Consultant turned owner dismantles toxic culture. Equity with teeth. Mercer rewrites the rules" at the top. His phone buzzed nonstop, but he didn't answer. It wasn't reporters calling. It was HR legal, external auditors, and worst of all, his attorney. Because Thane hadn't just suspended him with a flourish. He had triggered a chain reaction that reached into every folder, every camera feed, every thread of digital communication inside the company's fortress. By Monday, Thane had authorized the release of a redacted version of the internal investigation to Borealis's ethics board. The report spanned 48 pages and included time-stamped video clips, screenshots of internal chat threads, altered metadata logs, access restriction records, and anonymized witness accounts. Names were listed, timelines were drawn, and at the center of every diagram, Jasper Kincaid. It wasn't just about insults and marginalization. It was about a system of sustained exclusion masked as performance standards. It was about a culture that rewarded silence and punished dissent. And it was finally exposed. The board voted unanimously to place Jasper on indefinite suspension pending the outcome of formal arbitration. His badge was deactivated. His name removed from the executive portal. When he tried to re-enter the building Tuesday morning, security met him at the door with a sealed envelope and a neutral expression. He never made it past the lobby. That same day, Thane quietly authorized the release of the internal summit video, the unedited version, to the broader leadership circle. No memes, no laugh tracks, just the cold, uncut truth. Jasper humiliating him, live, before an international audience, reducing a strategic architect to a paper boy. The footage spread faster than expected. By nightfall, someone had leaked it to a well-followed business ethics blog. Within hours, it went viral. Not just for the overt disrespect, but for what followed. The clip of Thane, days later, commanding a whiteboard with surgical precision as Helix executives nodded in stunned silence. Public sentiment turned sharply. Hashtag Echelon Accountable trended for 2 days straight. Former employees began coming forward with stories. One said they were passed over for promotion 3 times after flagging similar behavior. Another revealed a spreadsheet labeled client optics that coded staff by race and appearance. A third posted an email from Jasper dated 2019 with a joke that didn't read like a joke. Screenshots spread across LinkedIn and Twitter like wildfire. Investors demanded accountability. Clients froze transactions. Recruitment partners canceled contracts. A major university severed an internship pipeline. Thane didn't gloat. He didn't post a single statement. He let the evidence speak. And it spoke loud enough to shake the company's foundation. By Thursday, 5 other senior executives were placed on leave. 2 resigned before they could be terminated. Internal Slack channels were flooded with reassessment initiatives. Town halls were called. Equity audits launched. One junior staffer, who had once laughed at the Tuesday meme, stood during a team meeting and said, "We all saw it, and we said nothing. I said nothing. That won't happen again." For the first time, accountability wasn't being requested. It was being enforced. Meanwhile, Thane moved quietly. He didn't claim Jasper's office. He didn't redecorate or rename departments. He simply showed up earlier, stayed later, listened more. He installed a new reporting channel. Anonymous, secure, external facing. He reorganized the review process. And when asked if he would take the title of CEO, he shook his head. "I'm not here for titles," he said. "I'm here to rebuild something that shouldn't have been broken in the first place." 2 months after the internal collapse that reshaped Echelon Capital, the world outside the skyscrapers began to move on, but inside boardrooms and investment circles, the name Thane Mercer had become synonymous with silent precision and transformative justice. Yet the man himself remained elusive, refusing interviews, turning down profile pieces, ignoring award nominations. Instead, he focused on rebuilding the company from the inside out, not as a monument to his victory, but as proof that accountability could coexist with growth. Departments were restructured, promotion tracks were audited for bias, and a new mentorship program was launched with full board approval, one that prioritized underrepresented talent. But just as Thane pushed the company forward, the world began to ask another question. What happened to Jasper Kincaid? The answer came quietly on a Monday morning, through a single video uploaded to a private channel, then reshared by a major nonprofit. A man seated on a folding chair in a sparse, sunlit room. No set, no makeup, no production crew. Jasper looked different. He was thinner, less polished, his once perfect hair graying at the temples. His suit replaced by a simple blue shirt, sleeves rolled up. He spoke directly into the camera, not as a man defending himself, but as one who had already stood trial in the mirror. "I was wrong," he said. "Not just in my words or my actions, but in how I let silence and status blind me to the people I work beside. I confused success with superiority. I thought being irreplaceable meant being untouchable. And I was wrong." There was no music, no fade-in logo, no PR polish. Just truth. He ended the video with a pause, then added, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I intend to spend what time I have left earning something close to it." Days later, it was revealed that Jasper had stepped into a full-time role at a grassroots racial equity foundation, one he once dismissed as overly idealistic in a private email that had since been leaked. He was no longer drawing 6 figures. He wasn't drawing any salary at all. He spent mornings training job applicants on interview strategy, afternoons building digital literacy curriculums, and weekends traveling to schools that had no Wi-Fi but infinite ambition. He never mentioned his former title. He introduced himself only as Jazz. Meanwhile, Thane continued to lead, not as CEO, but as a steward. He declined every executive bonus offered. He still worked in a corner office, without a nameplate. And then, one autumn evening, something unexpected arrived on his calendar. A request from the Aspen Forum for Ethical Capital. Would you consider sharing the stage for a joint discussion on leadership, legacy, and repair? The panel was titled Power and Redemption. When systems fail and people choose to change. The request included a second speaker, Jasper Kincaid. Thane didn't answer right away. He thought about it for 4 days. On the 5th, he replied with one word, yes. The event took place in a modest auditorium in Denver, without cameras, without live streams, just a packed room of business leaders, students, and skeptics. Jasper entered first, took a seat, hands folded, eyes lowered. Then Thane entered, dressed as always, elegant, understated, composed. When he took his seat beside Jasper, no one spoke. The moderator opened with a question: what does justice mean in the context of power? And for the first time, the room heard both voices together. Jasper said, justice is knowing the harm you've done and staying to help repair what you broke, even after no one's watching. Thane said, justice is the refusal to let silence protect power. The two men didn't argue. They didn't trade blame. They traded perspective. And somewhere in the middle, the audience stopped waiting for conflict and started listening for truth. As the panel ended, someone in the crowd asked what the future held for both of them. Thane looked at Jasper, then back at the crowd. I don't know, he said. But if it doesn't involve growth on both sides of power, it's not the future I'm building. Jasper nodded once, quietly. They left the stage side by side. Outside, the sun was setting behind the mountains. A few attendees asked for photos. One young woman approached Thane and said, you made me believe I don't have to leave to win. He smiled. You don't. But sometimes, you do have to stand alone first. And then he turned to Jasper, extended a hand, and said, we keep going. Jasper took it. Always. The end. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge injustice and inspire change. What part of the story hit you the hardest? Was it the moment Thane turned the tables, or Jasper's quiet reckoning in the end? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.